Robert Charles Zaehner was a British academic who specialised in Eastern religions. Earlier he had served as an intelligence officer in Iran. While a professor at Oxford University, he wrote on the Zoroastrian religion, on mystical experience, on the Hindu religion, and on comparative religion generally. His last several books addressed similar issues in popular culture. He published under the name R.C. Zaehner, Life and Career. Early years: born on 8 April 1913 in Sevenoaks, Kent. He was the son of Swiss-German immigrants to England. Zaehner was bilingual in French and English from early childhood. He remained an excellent linguist all his life. Educated at the nearby Tunbridge School, he was admitted to Christ Church, Oxford, where he studied Greek and Latin, and also ancient Persian including Avestan, gaining first-class honours in Oriental languages. During 1936–37 he studied Pahlavi, another ancient Iranian language, with Sir Harold Bailey at Cambridge University. Zaehner thereafter held Professor Bailey in high esteem. He then began work on his book Zoroastrian, A Zoroastrian Dilemma, a study of the pre-Islamic religion of Iran. Zaehner enjoyed a prodigious gift for languages. He later acquired a reading knowledge of Sanskrit, Pali, and Arabic. In 1939 he taught as a research lecturer at Christ Church, Oxford. About this time, after reading the French poet Rimbaud and in Rumi, the Sufi poet of Iran, as well as study of the Hindu Upanishads, Zaehner came to adopt a personal brand of nature mysticism. Yet his spiritual progression led him in the mid-1940s to convert to Christianity, becoming a Roman Catholic while stationed in Iran. British intelligence during World War II. Starting in 1943, he served as a British intelligence officer at their embassy in Tehran. Often he was stationed in the field among the mountain tribes of northern Iran. After the war he also performed a more diplomatic role at the Tehran embassy. Decades later, another British intelligence officer, Peter Wright, described his activities. I studied Zaehner's personal file. He was responsible for MI6 counterintelligence in Persia during the war. It was difficult and dangerous work. The railway lines into Russia, carrying vital military supplies, were key targets for German sabotage. Zaehner was perfectly equipped for the job, speaking the local dialects fluently, and much of his time was spent undercover, operating in the murky and cutthroat world of counter-sabotage. By the end of the war his task was even more fraught. The Russians themselves were trying to gain control of the railway, and Zaehner had to work behind Russian lines, continuously at risk of betrayal and murder by pro-German or pro-Russian. Zaehner continued in Iran until 1947 as press attaché in the British Embassy, and as an MI6 officer. He resumed his academic career at Oxford doing research on Zoroastrianism. During 1949, however, he was relocated to Malta where he trained anti-communist Albanians. In 1950 he secured appointment as lecturer in Persian at Oxford University. Again in 1951–1952 he returned to Iran for government service. Professor Nancy Lambton, who had run British propaganda in Iran during the war, had recommended Robin Zaehner for the embassy position. Journalist Christopher de Bella-Egue describes Zaehner as a born networker who knew everyone who mattered in Tehran, with a taste for gin and opium. When Kingsley Martin, the editor of The New Statesman, asked Zaehner at a cocktail party in Tehran what book he might read to enlarge his understanding of Iran, Zaehner suggested Alice Through the Looking Glass. Zaehner publicly held the rank of counselor in the British Embassy in Tehran. In fact, he continued as an MI6 officer. During the Abadan crisis he was assigned to prolong the Shah's royal hold on the Sun throne from the Republican challenge led by Mohammad Mossadegh, then the Prime Minister of Iran. The crisis involved the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, which had been in effect nationalized by Mossadegh. Zaehner thus became engaged in the failed 1951 British effort to topple the government of Iran and return oil production to that entity controlled by the British government. He plotted to overthrow Mossadegh and give the oil fields back to the AIOC was in the hands of a British diplomat called Robin Zaehner, later professor of Eastern religions at Oxford. Such Anglo and later American interference in Iran, which eventually reinstalled the Shah, has been widely criticized. In the 1960s, MI5 counterintelligence officer Peter Wright questions Zaehner about floating allegations that he had doubled as a spy for the Soviet Union, harming British intelligence operations in Iran and Albania during the period following World War II. Zaehner is described as a small, wiry-looking man, clothed in the distracted charm of erudition. Wright wrote in his 1987 book Spycatcher that Zaehner's humble demeanor and candid denial convinced him that the Oxford Don had remained loyal to Britain. Wright notes that, "I felt like a heel for confronting Zaehner, although in the intelligence service for the benefit of his government." On later reflection, Zaehner did not understand the utilitarian activities he performed as being altogether ennobling. In such government service abroad, he wrote, "Truth is seen as the last of the virtues and a lie comes to be a second nature." It was, then, with relief that I returned to academic life because, it seemed to me, if ever there was a profession concerned with a single-minded search for truth, it was the profession of the scholar. Quote, Professor Jeffrey Cripple discusses Zaehner's extraordinary truth-telling, which may appear politically incorrect. The too truthful professor might be seen as a redemptive, a compensatory act for his earlier career in dissimulation and deception as a spy. Oxford professor university positions before the war. Zaehner had lectured at Oxford University, back there at Christ Church several years after the war. He continued to work on his Zoroastrian book, and lectured in Persian literature. His reputation then rested on articles on Zoroastrianism, mainly philological, written before the war. In 1952 Zaehner was elected Spalding Professor of Eastern Religions and Ethics to succeed the celebrated Professor Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan, who had resigned to become Vice President of India. Zaehner had applied for this position. Radhakrishnan previously had been advancing a harmonizing viewpoint with regard to the study of comparative religions, and the chair had a subtext of being founded to propagate a kind of universalism. Zaehner's inaugural lecture was unconventional in content. He delivered a strong yet weighty criticism of universalism in religion. It drew controversy. Professor Michael Dummett opines that what concerned Zaehner was to make it clear from the start of his tenure of the chair that he was nobody else's man. Zaehner continued an interest in Zoroastrian studies, publishing his Zoroastrian book and two others on the subject during the 1950s. Since 1952, however, he had turned his primary attention further east. After my election to the Spalding chair, I decided to devote myself mainly to the study of Indian religions in accordance with the founder's wishes. Quote, he served Oxford in this academic chair, while also a fellow at All Souls College, until his death in 1974, and never married. Invited to deliver in Scotland the Gifford Lectures, Zaehner did so, travelling twice to the University of St. Andrews during the years 1967 to 1969. The subject he chose concerned the convoluted and intertwined history of the different world religions, during the long duration of the mutual coexistence. He described the interactions as both fiercely contested and relatively cross-cultivating, being in peaceful isolation or in uncertain proximity. The lectures were later published in 1970, just 4 years before his death, by Oxford University as Concordant Discord. The Interdependence of Faiths. Peer descriptions as a professor, Zaehner had a great facility for writing, and an enormous appetite for work, had a talent for friendship, a deep affection for a number of particular close friends, and an appreciation of human personality, especially for anything bizarre or eccentric. Nonetheless, he passed a great deal of his time alone, most of it in his study working. An American professor described Zaehner in a slightly different light. The small, bird-like Zaehner, whose roomy, color-faded eyes darted about in a clay-colored face, misted blue from the smoke of Gauloise's cigarettes, could be fearsome indeed. He was a volatile figure, worthy of the best steel of his age. His colleague in Iran, Professor Anne K. S. Lambton of SOAS, recalled, he did not perhaps suffer fools gladly, but from the serious student he would take immense pains. Professor Zaehner was an entertaining companion with many wildly funny stories, a man of great originality, not to say eccentricity. Zaehner was a scholar who turned into something different, something more important than a scholar, according to Michael Dummett, a professor of philosophy at Oxford, who wanted to call him a penser. With insight and learning, Zaehner shed light on key issues in contemporary spiritual life, writing abundantly. His talent lay in seeing what to ask, rather than in how to answer. In theology he challenged the ecumenical trend that strove to somehow see a uniformity in all religions. He acted not out of an ill will, but from a conviction that any fruitful dialogue between religions must be based on a pursuit of truth. If such profound dialogue rested on a false or a superficial harmony and friendship, it would only foster hidden misunderstandings, Zaehner thought, which would ultimately result in a deepening mistrust. He died on the 24th of November 1974 in Oxford. At the age of 61 he fell down dead in the street on his way to Sunday evening Mass.